special time for all of us here on the island and for everybody around the world. The response in love and best everything, the response on every hand to the Lahaina, the Kula. I evacuated from Kula last Tuesday. We're all in a sense of flux here, and it's as if what's always going on is revealed when something like this happens. So in our meditation today, I may go a little bit longer in the induction, and we'll move with that. And then it'll be 5 minutes of silence at the end of that. So let's gather together in a kind of sense of the oneness that is what's true. And as we close our eyes and through our breath on the inhale to receive all of what's happening, and on the exhale to allow it to be purified. And so we're breathing in all of reality without judgment, without limitation, just a sense of this very impacting time on planet Earth, especially here on our island home. Coming home to ourselves, we relax out of our minds and into our hearts. And in our heart is where everything arises that shows up, the one heart. This is where we know ourselves as oneness. This is where we all know ourselves as exactly the same. Tat Vam Asi, thou art that, I am that. This spacious, awake awareness has light in it. This is the source of all life. And there's no limit to what is alive, even in the appearances of these kinds of tragedies. We know that life is everything and it arises in many different ways, but we honor, appreciate, and engage in connection to the aliveness. We are not limited, we're not shut down by apparency of external realities, but we are lifted up into our connection with each other and with the heart of all that is. This spacious awake awareness is the one I am. Each of us knows ourselves as that. It's in that awake awareness that all realities arise. And as we are at peace within ourselves, at home in ourselves as awareness, we are contributing to a kinder, more beautiful connection in this reality, knowing that this reality transcends itself into a greater reality, and that is source. So awareness is source of all that is, and knowing ourselves as that, we come home to be together in this time, in this space, in love. And so it is. Did you test it? Where are they?
I'm sorry, I'll bring them back just one second. Thad, would you unmute once more and say something?
Hi, aloha.
Yeah.
Ah, hey,
That we can.
Hi.
Hi,
I'm glad to hear your voices.
we see you now.
Okay. Today. Give me 1 second to change this up. Okay, we are good to go.
We're all here together. I always think of Lily Tomlin's line, we're all in this alone. Certainly can seem that way. The field of this low frequency, fear-based polarity that we call this reality, that field is a distortion field because it has the frequency of fear and polarity as its underpinning, as its source. We find that to be true in our individual experiences, identified as being a person apart from everything else. And the dissociative boundary of the body-mind unit would certainly seem to hold us in that sense of separation and individuality. The distortion field for the collective, because again, based in polarity, which language installs and then is activated, the polarity, along with the frequency of fear, now we have a reality that is, we can think of it, this could cause some issues today, but I think of it as a simulation, which is the projection of consciousness onto what we call out there. When we're caught up in the frequency of fear and the sense of other, being other, then we have a tendency to need to get something or avoid something in order to be okay. The tendency to avoid or the need to get something keeps us magnetized into the external, which we see as the source of what we need to get or avoid. That is fundamentally a consumerist position. And so we now have a planet that's practically been consumed. And it's like what is available for people like us who are conscious, who are wanting to wake up out of the illusion of separation and fear. What's available for us is to reach out our arms and recollect our attention particles from out there and bring them back to our own hearts, from where we can be of great benefit to reality. The possibility of showing up as a blessing to this reality depends on us reclaiming our attention from out there. Most all of you have worked with me to some degree with the woundedness that is at the center of each one of us as we identify as being a person. We call it the childhood wound. The minute that that occurs in our early experience, our attention particles, which is the energy of consciousness, our attention is what we have in order to experience and to be aware of anything. It requires our attention. When our attention is magnetized, excuse me, when our attention is magnetized into the external, now we have self-abandoned. And so we experience, how do I do this?
I just took a little.
Okay. More technology. Once we have abandoned ourselves and our attention is magnetized into the external with the need to correct something out there, with the need to be appreciated or to be acknowledged or to be seen or to be fed or to be comforted or whatever we need to get it from out there, then the energy, the consciousness, the availability of our contribution to this enlarged reality, this whole reality, this collective reality is compromised. So as our attention is back with us, true north, what we start to know and experience about ourselves is what we experience in the meditation of this awareness, this aliveness, this arising of creation, awake awareness. I sometimes think of it as corollary to the heart chakra. And one of my favorite quotes from one of my favorite teachers is, the mind has no answers, the heart has no questions. And we find as we reclaim our attention from the external back to ourselves, we are embodying the love that's required to redream this reality. And so the possibility of a shift in the external reality depends on the possibility of the shift in one's own self-concept. This reality depends on who we think we are, because that's the frequency that's projected out there. That's a distortion field if we are still caught by an early wound of I don't matter, or I'm not important, or I'm not good enough. Then we are participating in a reality where there isn't any cohesiveness, where everything is transactional, where everything is about getting or giving, even in that. So as we come home to ourselves, and the way we come home to ourselves is to see that if we're suffering, we're literally believing something that's not true. And that is the litmus test, isn't it? If I'm suffering, what is it that I'm believing? Because that's creating the distortion field that looks as if it's the source of my suffering. We have access to create this reality in an entirely new way, but not from a position of believing that I've got to get what I need, or I am at risk here, or I'm not good enough. With that installed self-perception, which was the conclusion out of the early wounding, then we are participating in creating a world where suffering is everywhere. It's the hero's journey to turn away from the external and to come home to one's own heart, to come home and be present there. And from that place, know that I am whole, finding out what we've been believing that was not true, what was installed that created the distortion field of our own personal suffering. Because if there's a belief that I don't matter, I'm not good enough, I don't deserve to be loved, or I can't connect, or I can't love, what that frequency is that's the frequency of self-rejection underpinned by the frequency of fear. And now we are literally strangers in a strange land, looking for love in all the wrong places, right? Country Western songs are so good at expressing what really is going on, I think. So the opportunity for us is to understand that as we are willing to do our own work, as we are willing to see through what's been projected of the lens that was created by our self-rejection and our lack of self-regard, that is what we contribute to redreaming a new reality. Consciousness as a collective is what we would call heaven, and earth is the body, mind, and the physical geography, topography, all of this island in this case. But heaven and earth are always one. So heaven, as what's going on in consciousness collectively or individually, is the source for this external reality, whether it's our personal individual experience or a collective experience. I said a few weeks ago, it didn't get great reception, but I don't expect any kudos. I said a few weeks ago that I thought the original artificial intelligence occurred in what we call the Garden of Eden, when we moved from our hearts into our minds. And this is the artificial intelligence that has brought this planet and all of us individually to our knees. It's the intelligence that's not true intelligence because it's based in the rational analytic, and it's based in polarity. And the frequency that creates is one of fear. And so as we come home to ourselves, we are coming through the intelligence of the heart. And that intelligence is one that does not depend on diagnostics. It does not depend on any kind of, what I want to say. Well, the image that's in my mind is in my first biology class in college, where we were instructed to dissect a frog and then to see what the frog was. And I thought it's going to be really dead, for one thing. So it's like, how do you see life and all? Because our rational analytic mind is determined to analyze and to pull apart. And our heart wants wholeness. Our heart wants connection. And that's the true intelligence of who we are intended and can express as and experience as in our own lives. Yeah. So now that I can hear all of you there, you can ask questions or bring up topics. Thank you.
So if you're in the room, you can go ahead and just raise your hand. If you're on Zoom, you can also raise your hand or unmute yourself.
I'll keep talking. Is there a hand up over there? Is that the octopus?
It's the octopus.
Our dear friend Becky does amazing creative work, and I don't even know how to talk about it actually, but she's completed an octopus that's like amazing. I thought I saw one of its little tendrils going up. When something like occurs in the collective consciousness, like this this tragedy, catastrophe, it was what it is in Lahaina, that affect and was in Kula, where my tiny house is. Our minds go into fear and resistance to all of it. The possibility is to stay out of our minds and to use this opportunity to open our hearts and to simply be present with what is. Because if you're present with yourself, with your own open heart and with the circumstances as they are, without projecting through fear onto them, what comes in front of you to do will be a great contribution. And it doesn't have to be seen that way by you or anybody else, but it will show up based on the frequency of your willingness to show up, to be present. So when people ask me, because I've had many calls coming in of what they can do, it's like just be present and trust that from your open heart, whatever you can contribute will be appropriate and received and of great benefit in this circumstance, in this situation. With a planet of 7.5 billion wounded children who are not yet in their big boy pants. We have circumstances and situations of greed and again, the need to get or to avoid. And that frequency, again, which is one of fear, is the setup in this reality for this kind of outworking. There's somebody holding their hand up.
Yeah, Becky. Yeah.
This is my Becky.
About all the things that seem fishy about it, like the fact that we had intense winds with no rain that follows, and that's not what a normal storm does, but there are patents out for creating that, that there are so many things that are fishy about what went on, so that this was intentional. My mind goes to, and then I keep thinking about that, and it's like, how do Jews in Germany find peace in the middle of watching the Holocaust start to happen? How do I find peace? No, I hold the personal belief that the vaccine is genocide and it's about depopulation. How do I hold peace with all that? And then also love my friends who have different opinions and not get into it with them. But it just, I notice my mind goes there and it makes me machine.
Right. Yeah. And that certainly is something that in this incident and in all kinds of catastrophes like this, we go to, including the whole pandemic stories also. But in order to create a reality, we can't be held at the level of the problem that's presenting. Yeah. And that's what you're asking. You're asking, what is the opening into my consciousness that can hold all of this and not be pulled into the fear frequency? Is that what, yeah, like that?
But the horror of how a few people out of greed are willing to harm so many.
Yeah. Right. Well, what we can find, what we find in the collective, typically, and this is not to try to turn it around at all, but we can find a little bit of it in ourselves. And so when it gets writ large, like in the collective, and with a certain kinds of leverage that this reality has contributed to, the amassing of great wealth, the amassing of influence, and a way to do whatever is going on. The only work that we can do is to do the correction within our own consciousness, because that's what will create a new reality. We've got to relieve ourselves of this frequency of fear in the midst of exactly what you're describing, whether or not, whatever those stories are. And there certainly are some discrepancies in what can be seen in regard to this catastrophe in Lahaina. But the only answer is not at the level of the problem where it's already been. It can certainly be seen clearly, perhaps, or not. But the trick is that the call is to come home to oneself and to be present in as much fullness of open space in consciousness, as much opening into true nature as love, because this is a distorted field. This is a simulation. This is a projection. And just like a dream at night, when the monster turns around because he's been chasing you in your dream at night and says, and you say to it, I give up, do with me what you will. And the monster looks at you and says, this is your dream. Do with me what you will. So we're caught in the understanding of how reality works, and what our part is in it is really close. It's really specific. And we can't hold an identity of being caught in fear and expect to change this reality. It seems counterintuitive, counter-rational even, but that's where the work is. This is a projection of consciousness. Consciousness has been held for however long, I don't know that number. Consciousness has been held in a frequency of fear and the need to get and avoid. So for us to shift what is that cause in the matter of this reality is where we are now. And that is confronting and confounding in the midst of this kind of happening. Absolutely. Yeah. It's in this moment, who am I being? And who am I being present as true north? Present as the one I am, instead of the believing that I am a piece of shit or I don't matter, because that is the contribution that we're making to this external, polarized, fear-based condition that we call reality. If we don't get the connection between who we're being to ourselves and in our own identity, the connection between that and this larger experience, this larger reality, then we're not going to have access, because we are going to be playing out individually exactly what was causing the matter of this larger outworking. It's very interesting to start to actually understand that there's no solution at the level of the problem. I think that's a kind of a paraphrasing of some quote from Einstein. But the level that the problem's created is cause and effect and fear and isolation and consumerism. The level of greed, that level is, and so that at that level, we're not going to have a correction to that, because any correction we make at that level will create more problems. So at cause in the matter, consciousness is cause, and we have access to shifting consciousness through our own. We are the world in this sense that we have access to shifting our consciousness through doing our own work of seeing clearly who I am. And that awake awareness, in that awake awareness, that frequency does not partake of fear or greed. And that's what will, out of that can arise a new reality.
So one of the things that happens for me is that, here we are down in Maui Meadows. We were basically untouched, right? We've got the Kula with all their water problems and problems up there. We've got Lahaina with the devastation there. And then we have millions of people asking us how we are, right? And I can be clear in myself. And then when someone asks me how I am, I feel like I tap into whatever experience they're having and go to speak to that. It's very, I talked to you about this a little bit yesterday. It's very hard just to stay in this heaven realm here, and not match what's coming towards, because it feels like it's coming in every direction.
Well, the way in which I sense that it's coming in every direction, and I love you, but that's your mind. When we talk about how tough things are or how they're piling on, what we're really pointing to is what's going on in our mind. Because what's really going on right here, right now, you can answer the text, or you can take out the trash, or you can hold your friend's hand. But where people experience overwhelm, where we all experience difficulty, is in our mind. Without that grab, that mental grab onto something that then typically proliferates, then we have presence and access to being, because we do not contribute anything to a shift in this reality by being caught in fear and what the mind tends to insist on.
Yeah. So I just watch you be so skillful with this, like whatever's happening, you stay in your purity or your clarity and bring that level of consciousness to that. How do you do that?
Well, and the mind has fallen away. The identity with being a fear-based mind just doesn't happen here anymore. And so there's spaciousness in consciousness. Knowing who you really are is the answer. And that's the work that we do here together in the Sangha and in this community, is because the minute that you know who you are as awake awareness, then you have the body-mind unit, the whatever gifts. Mind sometimes is talking. Sometimes that doesn't work that well. But whatever it is, it's available not for a mind who feels compromised or needy, not for a mind that thinks she's not good enough, but for the presence of the oneness that is true and the expression through the body-mind unit, which will be natural and authentic once you have reclaimed your attention particles from out there, including your mind, which is out there too, in my book. Yeah. So it's about coming home to one's true self. And from that place, we're powerful in terms of the connection, because that's where we are all exactly the same. Our expressions through the body-mind unit are specific with the gifts, whatever they are, with the talent, whatever that is. But at the level of experience, the awake awareness that we are is what's our true nature. And awareness is shining on everything, shining, and to know that I am that. And then there is what it's shining on, which are objects that come and go, including all that we see in the external reality that is a projection through the distortion field of fear and polarity. So our correction to fear and polarity is within our own individual perception, creation of that. It's what we have access to, which each of us has access to, is the awareness that is the truth, and it's who we are as one. That's where we are all exactly the same, the awareness. And then what we have to operate through is the specificity of our vehicle, our body-mind unit, our astrology, our human design, right? And so, but what happens once you're no longer identified with the conclusion that you made as a wounded child, I'm not good enough, I don't matter, I'm not loved, when that has disappeared because it's seen through, the awareness shining on that wound dispels it. That's what forgiveness is. Awake awareness shining on a conclusion about my limitation or my woundedness will dispel it. It's like sunlight on mold. It's like alchemical. It dispels it. And then the vehicle is available for its highest expression.
So, Polly.
Yeah.
So I'm just getting now, because you've said I've heard all this before.
Yeah, you have.
But I'm just getting that I think there's something about the global nature of this that I didn't take to a personal conclusion. And in this moment, I'm seeing like, oh, if my mom's not happy, it's not okay for me to be happy or in my well-being, right? So I have to somehow join that energy. So I'm just seeing, to bring it back down is what's getting triggered. That we talked about the fish,
right?
That's really what's getting triggered. The lower thing, right, is getting triggered.
That's right. And that pulls you into the external, because that's what happened for the wounds for all of us, which if we incarnated here, we were set up for that early wounding. But that wound for all of us pulled us into the external. It pulled us into a self-conclusion, and it pulled us into the external. So to come home, to drop the rational analytic mind, come into the heart and know ourselves as the awareness. A rational analytic mind is a great tool, but it's a shitty ruler. I mean, that's what's creating all the consternation in our individual lives. But when we come back to ourselves, which has to do with what I said earlier about reclaiming your attention particles from out there and back here, true north. When we're back here, true north, we are powerfully effective because we are at a different frequency. We now are at the frequency for the new possibility of the new heaven and the new earth. When you're caught up and out there, no matter what it looks like, instead of being present here. So it's a difference between getting and some dominion, like, oh, in the garden story, I think that human beings were given dominion over the garden, but it was like not domination, but dominion, the caretaking, the connection, the experience of oneness, and not the need to control or the need to block out or get anything. So when we find our attention pulled into the external, whether it's a catastrophe like Lahaina on our cooler or this island, and when we are back, we bring our attention back here and we're true north and we're not tilted toward anything as being, because what will magnetize us into the out there is a frequency connection with our own fear-based person. When you're back here, true north, you're very effective in doing whatever comes to you to do. And it will come because there is a resonance. The frequency of being true north and authentic is the resonance of being effective in what looks like an external reality. The operative word, it being what it looks like. Right? Yeah. Yeah. So you're being pulled by that, what you just described. Right. The minute you recognize that, you simply can reclaim, you come back to oneself. The difference between what you are and what you can see is the distinction in identity. The difference between what I have as a fear-based expression, person, identity, and who I am as the awareness that knows that. As long as I am present as the awareness that's aware of that, then I am true north and fully funded to be a creator of a new reality. Whenever anybody individually does this work and drops the fear-based identity, it's what we call waking up. It doesn't have to be like that. That's a way to talk about it. Waking up out of the illusion of being a person who with limitations and fears. When that happens consistently, and all of you in here who've had these experiences, whether or not they have lasted, what happens is that your reality shows up differently because now the frequency of how this out here shows up is different. You are now present on your own behalf. And so your world reflects that. This is the way we create our own reality. I don't like that kind of new age, The Secret thing, like you create your own reality, because I can always see, I used to be able to see all of the ego response to that, right? But it's not, the ego response to that holds you at a level of getting or denying something. Whereas who you truly are, when you come home to yourself and you've seen through the distorted lens of your early wounding, then that's a frequency changer and your world changes because it's your frequency that shows up as an external reality and an internal reality for that matter.
Questions, thoughts, comments?
I have a question of when it's a crisis that's happening, like it just happened on Maui, people become energized, they see it, they start really working at it. And it seems like that's when the most change happens. Yet a vast majority of life can feel like it's just the neutral or mundane, the common thing happening day after day. And yet I hold the belief that everything's either coming from a place of love or a place of fear. but it's so hard to dig in or get to what's really going on when it just feels like it's a neutral situation. On the one hand, on the other hand, I'm hearing nothing really is neutral.
Right.
How do you dig into those places that aren't in a crisis,
Mhm.
but really on a much more subtle level?
Yeah, well, one of the things you're pointing to is something that is so interesting about human nature caught in fear, and that is how it mobilizes around an event, whether it's a war or a catastrophe like in Lahaina and Kula, that it gets everybody's attention. And so now your attention is not on your own fear-based, but your attention is now drawn into cooperation and a feeling of wanting to contribute. The event can take us into what we might call a higher mind. The way to be present without the external impetus, right? The way to be present is to be present with oneself and notice if there's something that keeps that aliveness from showing up. So the aliveness is always, that's who we are. What happens there's an interesting book written back in, I think in the 50s, called Mankind and Amnesia. And this writer, who was a psychiatrist, his name was Velikovsky, had a theory that human beings, because they'd been over the evolution of humankind, there'd been so many catastrophes that we were inherently attracted to catastrophe.
Mhm.
And so that, you know, instead of staying in the cellar when the tornado's coming, everybody's running outside to see it, right? It's like this kind of imprinted attraction to catastrophe. But I do believe that something that we all can turn toward, like the fires in Lahaina and the Kula condition, that we respond to that. The possibility is, see, with a lack of self-regard, we have a lack of regard for peace and ease and wholeness, right? Because we feel more alive when there's a crisis.
Hmm.
So instead of experiencing the aliveness that is our nature, like the fullness of the presence of peace, the wounded identity is going to be more engaged by catastrophe. It's going to be more engaged by something external to itself, asking for response.
Right.
So instead of being present and true north on our own behalf in the fullness of, just as metaphor I would call the garden, which is happy and love and a connection, we're looking like this out here, right? So does that answer your question, Steve?
Completely. It was the part of aliveness. My term for it is just a joyous feeling each moment of the day.
Mhm.
And then if it's that neutral, well, it's just neutral, that actually should be my signal that something's off. If
Mm.
it's not the
Mhm.
aliveness, the
Yeah.
joyous coming out,
Right.
then something's off to look at. It's not what I would term neutral anymore.
Yeah, the sense of the peacefulness that is our true nature, and it's like a rising. You know, I sometimes talk about the model of reality being the tube torus, where energy frequency is moving up through the donut shape and overflowing, and that's a sense of just well-being, and it's not neutral.
Mhm.
It's not neutral. Yeah.
So Priya asked, how does reality work?
Oh, give me a moment. Let me- Well, in my simple kindergarten model of how reality works is that it is a projection, that consciousness is a fundamental source of all reality, consciousness, which is another name for awareness, and that awareness gets shaped by our belief and our limitation and our awareness is the interface into the greater field of consciousness, which is what we point to during the meditation as awake awareness, that the human consciousness shapes that. And if the human consciousness is not through a distortion lens of a fear-based identity, then the way it shapes it is to create the garden, to create the experience of the fun of a 3D reality. But typically what happens is that that lens, that distortion field of the human suffering that's fueled by the early wounding and the self-conclusion. So now I'm a person and I believe something about myself, like I'm not lovable, or I'll never get what I want, or I'm not good enough. And then that is the information that creates the distortion field through which consciousness moves and then shows up as a reality that reflects back what one believes. That's it.
So basically, probably what you're saying is that frequential match. That if I'm awake, aware, and I'm back to my true north, to myself, my frequency is high enough that this kind of catastrophe or other kind of things is not in my radar per se, is not matching my frequency. But if I'm low frequency, if I'm on the storm field, my frequency is low, and that's when you get, so that's why you say that you get attracted to catastrophe, is because that's a frequency that is familiar for us for the wounding of the child. So we know how it's to feel like hopeless.
That's right.
Because we had that experience as a frequency in our childhood.
Yeah.
So when things like Lahaina happen, what you feel like, oh, that is familiar, and everybody go in front of the TV and want to see the news and check on Facebook, because that is a frequency that I'm
Familiar.
Yes.
Yes.
And make me feel like familiar is, but if I raise my frequency, and that's what we are saying here, I can do that sometimes, but when catastrophe or things like this happen, you're saying that, Robin, I feel pulled to that because in somewhere my frequency, no, I already been there the past. That's what Eckhart Tolle called the
Pain body.
Pain body.
Yeah.
And it's like, because that was so familiar for us that you get attracted for that frequency that others or as qualitative you're going through. But where you are, your frequency is so high that the things that's happening low frequency doesn't affect you. The things that don't affect you.
That's true to a certain extent. They don't in that way. You simply are doing what's in front of you to do, but you're not caught up in participation. One of the pieces that's an aspect of that Steve was pointing to is that it can mobilize our higher frequency. By wanting to contribute, by wanting to make a difference. You know, I mean, people caught in their own fear-based identity go along day after day doing their usual life and being irritated at their partner or worried about money or whatever. But then something happens and their attention is like magnetized into their higher wanting to contribute, or their higher heart, their love. But in terms of our individual lives going along, like the idea that there's something wrong, that's what goes away once you've healed the distortion field that was created by your own childhood wound. The idea that, I mean, doing what's in front of you to do is just the way of it. And it's not figuring it out with your mind. Because what the mind is the seat of well, we could call it the seat of Satan, right? It's like that mind is like the snake in the garden that says, go ahead and take a bite. You shall not surely die. Laughing all the way, right? As he offers the apple, right? So it's like the freedom that we have as we no longer identify with being a person who's at risk or who's wrong or who's not good enough. As that falls away, then we are available for all kinds of expressions. Typically, our expressions will be based on the incarnating vehicle through the human design.
So one thing I just want to say, and we're just at the bottom of the hour, is that what I watch you do is not spiritual bypass. I don't see her go to a frequency and separate, but actually connect, be at one with, so then you know what to do, or you know
Right.
how to respond. It's not a resistance. It's not a higher than. I don't watch you do that at all.
No, because what's true that one gets when one drops the distortion field is that it is just one, and it is all connected, and there's no more question about it anymore. And you understand where you are participating just from proximity and what's showing up, right? I mean, I didn't have any sense about making this Zoom and this group happen, or the other 2 or 3 groups here in South Maui, but they arose in the space, and I am totally available in response to whatever shows up, because I don't have anything to get or avoid. So that's what makes us available. We don't have any agenda, right? Nothing missing. So are there
Yeah,
any?
It's time. It's 3:30.
Okay, so it's over to you.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Polly. We're going to take a short break. If you'd like to make a contribution to Polly,
Oh, I did want to report that the goggles are amazing. It's a big learning curve, but they worked right away, which surprised me. And they're going to be, I'll be having the sessions that they offer, which is amazing, sessions and coaches that come with it for the next 13 weeks. But I could see things I hadn't seen in years, actually. So thank you, everybody.
You just wear that and you can see better, Polly?
Well, when you wear it, you can start to read, you can see screens, you can see the room. Like if I had them on now, I'd be able to see everybody in the room.
Oh.
but she doesn't walk with them. It's not like that.
And no, you can't just,
Yeah, you'll be
there are limitations, yeah.
So thank you, everybody. You're welcome to stay. You're welcome to go. Good to see you, from. We're going to turn off the recording, and